I think you have to really understand the problem before you can develop a solution. Understanding the downstream effects of whatever problem it is, who else does it impact, and what ways does it impact them. By really truly understanding the problem, then you can appropriately design a solution.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen case study series. On this episode, I have Dave Hine, who is the Senior Director of Solutions Consulting at Greenfire. His career path is quite interesting, transitioning from aerospace and engineering into the clinical trial industry. He joined Greenfire back in 2018 and has since been passionate about the company's mission and solutions. Greenfire's technology solutions aim, among other things, to streamline clinical trial processes and improve patient centricity. And we're excited to have Dave on the show today to talk about his experience with customer acquisition and relationship management as it relates to technology. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Devin.
So to get things started here, I'd love to get a quick little Coles Notes background on who you are beyond what I've shared and how you came to be the Senior Director of Solutions Consulting at Greenfire.
Yeah, sure. When I was younger, I loved math and physics. And so then what better thing to do with your career than to study airplanes? And thought that was pretty cool and got to do that for a while. And then about 6 years into my career as an engineer, I realized I found myself gravitating towards people more than I did my cubicle and my computer. And that was rare. That was odd in the engineering world. There were a couple of other people that were similar to me, but most preferred to be heads down and doing their technical work. And so I tried to find opportunities to go beyond that, and was lucky enough to stumble into this sales engineering, pre-sales opportunity where it typically takes somebody with a technical background, but that also likes talking to people. And so I kind of stumbled into it, and I've been doing it ever since. And I love talking to people. I love helping people, and I love presenting, but I also love the opportunities that I do get to be technical from time to time as well.
That's super relatable. I know just from like my own personal experience, kind of being a bookworm, I've always been fascinated with the social hierarchies and just our traditions and the way that we interact. And so there's a really beautiful kind of crossover or marriage of these two ideas of being technically intelligent about certain things, but then also like being able to reach out and connect with other people, and there's almost a science to it. Would you agree to that?
There's definitely a science. It can be studied and you can improve. I mean, there's tons and tons of sales books out there and how to win friends and influence people, right? I think that's Stephen Covey's book. I think that's a really popular one, but there's science to it for sure. There's definitely things that you can do. I don't love that aspect because it feels manipulative to me at times. Mm-hmm. But there are definitely things that you can do to just be better at engaging with people, and you can do it from a good heart, from a good place, and it's well-meaning, even if you're using some technique that you read out of a book.
Right, especially when your skills are so deeply ingrained into the technical knowledge or the application or a system or a process or something like that, and or at least you're confident that what you do helps other people. There's this weird bridge of like, okay, how do I take the things that I know and then get that in front of a group of people that I know I can help, and then get them to want to work with me. And sometimes you do have to rely on some of that external stuff to really make that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on where you are in that sales process, right? Are you trying to get their attention? Are you trying to convince them they have a problem? Or are you trying to convince them that your solution is the answer to their problem? And so depending on where you're at in that cycle, it takes a completely different type of conversation and type of questions you're going to ask or information you're going to provide.
Right. So let's explore that a little bit, Dave. Inside of Greenfire, what does that process look like in terms of finding the right people, having the right message to communicate with them, and then, drawing them into the business?
Yeah, it's a really fairly robust process. We have a marketing department that is super busy. I mean, we are always publishing a blog or a webinar or attending a conference and doing that kind of high level awareness based marketing. Then we also have a part of that team doing outreach, one-on-one to specific individuals that are targeted within our industry And then eventually, once somebody shows interest, then they enter into a sales cycle where they have a salesperson assigned specifically to them to walk them through the steps to really understand their specific situation, their needs, whether or not our technology is going to be a good option for them. And then once we sign them up, we have a team that onboards them, implements the situation, the study, and then goes from there.
You started back in 2018, which was just before a very monumental event in our collective history, which arguably pushed forward the necessity for us to leverage technology in the way that we do business. I'm curious to see what happened for you and your team when that all went down. How did you guys shift and navigate that complex waters?
Yeah, oh my gosh. So, pre-COVID, when we would meet with clients for sales calls, we either met in person or like we would literally go to a conference room and we would sit in the conference room around a speakerphone and share one screen and everybody be looking at the same screen. Nobody used Zoom. Nobody used Google Meet. Nobody used Teams. It literally was unheard of. And so when we went home and all were working remote, I still remember the first time I ever recorded a video. I was like, can you see my screen? Can you see my face too? Like, I'm not sure if you can even see me, And it's like, you had to adjust. You had to figure out what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? But really, we just took the virtual meeting world and really figured out, okay, how can we make this work? How can we still have those conversations? How can we still make them as effective and impactful as possible? And it was by adopting, like turning our videos on, things that nobody had ever done before. Nobody had ever turned a video on in a call. And now all of a sudden we had to, because it was the only way we could see somebody, see their face, let them see ours, etc.
Yeah, that, although being an odd experience, I remember growing up watching TV shows like The Jetsons, and they had video phones, and I was like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to do that. And fast forward, here we are in 2024 having conversations remotely from
Yeah.
all over the world. I've talked to all kinds of industry leaders about a variety of different topics, and none of this would have happened had that not taken
Yep.
place. At least I don't see that having been on my radar. You don't know what you don't know, obviously, right? So
I agree. I will say to this day, I still don't FaceTime. Like if I call my parents, I'm talking to them. It's on speakerphone or I'm holding it up to my ear. I don't really FaceTime with anybody. And but these calls, it's so normal now to have a video on. Just super normal, relatable. I really, really enjoy it. Once I get to know people, though, I actually intentionally will try to call them on the phone and have a phone conversation, because sometimes it's just less pressure. Sometimes it's easier not to have to be at your computer with your video on. I'll do walk and talks with my team instead of a video one-on-one. So if once a week I'm meeting with somebody on my team, I'm like, do you guys just want to go for a walk? The weather's nice out, at least where I am. I'm going to go for a walk, and I'll put my AirPods in and I'll walk around my block for half an hour having a phone call with somebody rather than a Zoom call. So it's just about being intentional with the way that we communicate and which medium are you going to use to do it.
Right. And then, unbeknownst to all of us, after having to go through this technological advancement, another big breakthrough comes and kind of hits the mainstream media or the mainstream zeitgeist, as it were. And I'm referring to AI.
Yeah.
And I get that language models and predictive things and variations, early variations of this type of technology has existed before, and not very many businesses have implemented it. But now we're seeing this influx of usage of this type of technology for a variety of different reasons. I'd love to get Dave, your perspective on how you're implementing some of this technology, and then maybe we can go into some of the challenges that we're facing together with it.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on in terms of its use. I mean, it was only a month or so ago that now when you Google things, an AI response pops up at the top, right?
Right.
So yeah, the transformation's been incredible. And yeah, so I guess what specific questions do you have regarding that? You kind of asked a general question. Do you want to ask a specific one, or I could just talk?
Yeah, so first, let's kind of look at what are some of the ways that Greenfire is implementing some of this technology or has been implementing some of this technology.
Yeah, I think that one of the things you have to be considerate of is where and how to implement AI. The interesting thing to know about our industry of the clinical trial industry is it's highly regulated. We're dealing with people and their health data. So that's a sensitive issue. So very, very personal data that has to be really, really well protected. On top of that, that data has to be cleaned and accurate because it's what's used to prove safety and efficacy for the drugs that are coming onto the market. So there's immense control and oversight over the data and the processes that happen within a clinical trial. Greenfire operates within that business, but also operates on the financial side. So it's the movement of money between organizations and people within a clinical trial. So not only do we have to comply with all of those HIPAA standards and data privacy standards, we also have all of the banking and financial regulations as well, which often are contradictory. In the clinical trial world, everything has to be blinded. You can't know who anybody is. And in the financial world, you have to know where every penny went all the time. And
Right.
so we have to kind of bridge that gap and walk down the line that somehow does both at the same time. So it's actually extremely difficult for a company like us to take too much advantage, I put that in air quotes, of AI because we have to be accurate. We have to be compliant. And so there are opportunities to use it for workload reduction, but we can't do it if it's going to jeopardize data quality or regulatory compliance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds a lot to me like juggling chainsaws.
It's very much like juggling chainsaws, yes. So, one of the things that we do in this industry and that Greenfire in particular does is we often will reimburse a person who's participating in a clinical trial if they had to pay for something because they were participating. So if you were to join a clinical trial and you wanted to test out a new medicine for, let's just say COVID, because that's what everybody was doing 3 years ago. It's the most famous clinical trial of all time. 40 some thousand people volunteered to take a vaccine that they didn't know whether it would work or not back when they were developing this. Those
Right.
participants were going to get reimbursed for their drive mileage or for their tolls or their parking because they had to drive, 25 miles to the doctor's office. Then they had to pay to park in the parking garage and all that. So they get reimbursed for that. If there is a receipt that was collected at that parking garage, AI could be applied to read that receipt to ensure that A, it truly is parking and that it's $25 and that it's the day of the visit, not 3 years before the visit,
Right.
right? So language models can be developed to, the NLP, and I'm not a machine learning person, so like any use of terms may be slightly inaccurate.
Right.
But right, they can develop these models to read things like that to figure out, okay, what is this for? What category does it fit in? How much is it? And then should it be approved or not? Should we pay for it or not? So that's one of the ways that it can be introduced.
I'm curious to get your perspective on some of the more client-facing stuff like part of the marketing process to doing outreach or for the relationship management part where you got to like remind people of appointments or that sort of thing. Have you seen any application of that in the industry?
I have not. I follow some guys on LinkedIn that use call recording,
Mhm.
and that's one of those things that fascinates me. I wish we could record our calls and then it would tell me what percentage of the time I spoke, or might pop up on my screen. Hey, now's a good time to ask this question or that question. I've seen examples of it. I've not seen that used in our industry, and I think there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, recording of calls due to the nature of HIPAA and financial compliance. Again, it often people just are a little bit nervous about recording calls. Where's the data going? Where's the conversation going? Things of that nature. But I do see applications, at least in the call recording side, how it could work and be beneficial.
Okay, so then let's look at and this is where it kind of gets a little bit more 30,000 foot in terms of strategy or ideas here, but what sort of challenges do you see in the industry that you might find it useful for some kind of AI or automation to help with?
Well, I was you mentioned that I joined Greenfire in 2018. There was a 2-year gap where I was not at Greenfire. So from 2021 to 2023, I was actually doing sales in our industry, doing direct sales, not solutions consulting or sales engineering. And boy, did I hate prospecting. It is just, you know, everything about it. Researching, finding, first you got to find the company. You got to identify which companies might be a good fit. Then you got to find the people within the company. Then you have to find that person's email address or phone number. Then you have to craft a message based on everything you've read about them on their profile, on their company profile, etc. And you have to write a message to send it to them that you hope they will open because you've not put in too many links, that your subject line wasn't too weird, but also not too boring. And so you're manipulating stuff constantly, trying to just get them to open the message. And then you're trying to write the body such that they'll reply. And, it was exhausting, and it was very, very low success rates, extremely low, right? You just don't get a lot of responses. So there are absolutely ways where, AI could come in and tell you who you need to be talking to, tell you what they care about, tell you messaging that would work because it's worked with similar people to them, and very likely actually send the messages on your behalf as well. So, in an ideal world, that's what I would want as a salesperson. Just do all that for me and let me talk to the human when there's somebody that wants to talk to me.
Yeah, that's a common challenge that most people that we've spoke to in the industries that we've talked to have faced is there are mundane and repetitive tasks that, why don't we already have the technology for that? I'm not sure, but some of the stuff that's being built and how we're now starting to get used to it. I know that a lot of people initially there was all the doom and gloom guys that come out and say, oh, the sky's falling, the AI is going to take control and the machines are going to turn humans into batteries, and all of a sudden we're in the matrix, right? But the reality, I think, has been that there are useful tools that we can create that solve problems that we have, and from what you've shared with me, it sounds like if you were to wave a magic wand, the sales function of prospecting would be the first place that you would want to see that magically transform into something useful.
100%. Prospecting is the thing that I had to do. It was never the thing that I wanted to do.
Right.
It was the thing that made me wonder whether I was annoying my buyers or actually helping them figure something out. Every once in a while I'd meet somebody at a conference and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Dave. I've sent you 12 emails." And sometimes they would look at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sometimes they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I got your emails." And every once in a while they'd be like, "You're the podcast guy." And I was like, "Yeah, I sent you a podcast." And so all of a sudden it was like, "Oh my gosh, like somebody actually read my email. This is great." But you don't know. And what
Right.
works with one person may not work with another, right? So I really do think that as a business, generating that top of funnel pipeline, getting them to the point where they talk to a salesperson, that's what I would want to automate. Because once they talk to us, then it's a human to human conversation, and their situation is going to be different than the last person I talked to. Our solution may or may not be a fit. It's very nuanced. And I don't think you're going to be able to replace that with AI, but there are certain things that people may be Googling or doing on the internet that would say, yes, that's a good fit, and therefore you should reach out. And what's the most effective way to reach out? Well, that algorithm might know better than me. But I also wouldn't want to lose the personality, because is the AI model going to know to send them a podcast? And then when I go to meet with them for the first time, we've already got this connection. So it's a little bit of, you almost want to partner with whatever method you have to come up with this. So it's still you. It's not generic. It's not this generic thing sending it off. It's got a flavor of you to it, but at a minimum, help me find the right people. So
Yeah, I've seen a number of videos and clips and things like that on the generative function of AI and how, oh, graphic designers, you got to look out, or da 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 da. But the reality is when as a designer myself, when I get in there and I'm using the tool, it does none of the things that it is meant to do, and the outputs are never as good as what you think it should be. And so um, there's this gap that needs to be filled between what
yeah,
our expectation of the technology is and what's actually happening with it. And I think you touched on that, and it's a difficult thing for us all to kind of collectively navigate. But I think some of the bigger players that are doing the work in terms of developing these technologies are listening, right? They're hearing what's going on. They're seeing how we're interacting with this stuff, and because it's such a data-driven industry, I think that with enough data, we'll get to where we need to be. Um, for Greenfire, is there room for new technologies, or are you guys, um, you know, refining your internal stuff and really feeling like that's what's going to bring you the success, just the perspective of like where the industry is headed?
I would say it depends. I know that's probably a cliche and not necessarily great answer. For
Right.
me, any problem is solved, and any organization is run with good people, process, and technology. It's about all three of them. And so you have a problem, or you want to do prospecting better, or you want to convert more leads better, or whatever it might be. Technology is not necessarily the answer. So maybe it's a people problem, maybe it's a process problem. And I think all three of those things have to work well together to help you achieve whatever your goal is. The good news is we've been a high functioning, high growth team and company for 16 years. I think we were just, awarded again some award for being top growing company, right? Like we're always winning these awards. We're continuously hitting aggressive growth goals that are sales and revenue and bookings and profit oriented, right? So all those things. Um, so there's not a glaring problem. I just know when I had to do it as a salesperson myself, it was annoying and time consuming. So
Mhm.
there's when you don't have a glaring need, maybe you've got a small leak on the side of the boat, but you don't have a huge hole where a cannonball went through. Um, you're not going to pay as much attention. So I'm sure there are some things that we could be open to that would help us optimize. But I feel like we have a pretty good foundation in all three: people, process, and technology, that we're really optimizing what we have as opposed to looking for a solution to a problem.
Right. Okay. And so I guess what would you attribute the current success to? Is that because of the people? Is that because you're constantly optimizing, or is there specific tools that you're using that are helping contribute to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It has to be everything. We've always had great people. It was one of the reasons that I came to Greenfire in the first place, and it's one of the reasons that I came back to them after my 2-year break. I knew I wanted to come back and work with these people, very passionate, very intelligent, hardworking people. And when you get that kind of group of people working together, especially under good leadership, I love our VP of marketing, Amy Sitnick. If you're ever listening to this, like, she knows I love her. She's just so passionate about doing what we do and doing it well. She's always going to be pushing the boundaries of the people, the process, and the technology to ensure that we can, you know, meet our goals and do things well. So, um, yeah, we're doing people well, we're doing process well. From a tool standpoint, we have a bunch of tools. We have webinar tools. We have Sales Loft, right? We can do cadences and different things that allow us to market and send emails and track emails, and we've got the Zoom and the Teams and the whatever we need to do to host meetings, and it's all tracked in Salesforce, right? Like we have a set of tools that help us run our business, and we build good process around the set of tools that we have.
I love that the trifecta, the tools, the having the systems and processes, but then having the people to be able to properly manage that and move things forward. Um, As we kind of close out this episode, I'd love to get your insight on, what are some of the bigger goals that you're aiming at? Where's Greenfire headed, and what sort of trends do you see that you're going to start to implement inside of the business?
Oh, well, this is a fresh one. Maybe it's relevant to this coach approach. I'm sorry, to this AI things, but I've been sharing with some people internally that I think we need to take a coach approach instead of a training approach.
Hmm.
We have tens of thousands of users all around the world, and we often train them. Hey, you're new, here's training. Well, there's recurring training, but there's almost a lack of accountability. And I was having a conversation with a family friend not that long ago, and he mentioned how he really enjoys coaching more than he does training, because coaching is repeated. It's every other week for 6 months, and it's one-on-one, and it's very specific, and it's all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, man. And he's like, the growth that I can see doing that versus like sitting a bunch of people in a room and training them how to be a better executive. Well, if I can coach them over time to be a better executive, it's more impactful. And I think that's an avenue for us in marketing, in sales, in onboarding, and in ongoing support. How do we map that user journey and understand where can we coach them? And what kind of coaching is right? Is it an email to just, hey, how's it going? Is it a webinar or a podcast that we need to share about a specific topic? Do we need to connect with them at a conference? What's this journey for a user, and how do we ensure that they're going to get the most out of our software? And so how can we just take that kind of more coach approach, holding them accountable throughout that process? And I could see AI being part of identifying where in that process those things need to be, and maybe even helping us execute some of the different things throughout. So who knows?
Yeah, the sky's the limit as far as technology goes. We've seen so many new things happen, and it's moving so quickly. It's almost impossible to keep up with some of the transformations. So that's really helpful. Dave, in closing, I like to ask my guests a bit more of a high level question here. If you had one single piece of advice for others who are in a similar role as you, who are exploring some of these technologies and trying to optimize their success, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think you have to really understand the problem before you can develop a solution. Root cause analysis, understanding the downstream effects of whatever problem it is, who else does it impact, and what ways does it impact them. By really truly understanding the problem, then you can appropriately design a solution, and then that solution can hopefully impact the downstream, can impact all the different stakeholders. And of course, when you go to communicate this solution to other people, you have to make sure they're aware of the problem as well. So if you don't understand the problem, then you're not going to get anywhere. So that would be my advice: understand your problem.
Sound advice, Dave. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to work with you or pick your brain, is that possible? And if so, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking to people. We met randomly, I'm pretty sure, through LinkedIn. That's generally how conversations like this would happen. So I'm on LinkedIn, Dave Hine, work at Greenfire. Look me up. I'll connect with you. I'll respond to your message if you send me one, and we'll see what happens.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes. Otherwise, that if you wanted to get in touch with us for any reason, it's nextgengrowth.com. But that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next one.